Have you ever felt like the world is spinning faster, but somehow we're thinking less? Like we're drowning in information, but starving for wisdom? It's not your imagination. Something is happening. Something deep, something dangerous. And a French philosopher named Bernard Stiegler had a name for it: stupidity. But not the kind you're thinking of. This isn't about being dumb. It's about a system, one that breeds forgetfulness, obedience, and distraction. A system that creeps into our schools, our politics, our media, and even our minds. While the world faces crisis after crisis, climate breakdown, financial collapse, AI revolutions, we're losing the very tools we need to understand what's going on. Worse, we're losing the will to understand. This is the story of how we got here, of what Stiegler called a state of shock, and how, if we're not careful, we might lose the ability to think our way out of it. Let's begin. When we hear the word stupidity, we usually think of someone who's uninformed, maybe not too bright, a moment of clumsiness, a silly mistake. But what if stupidity isn't just an accident? What if it's a system? That's exactly what Bernard Stiegler argued. For him, stupidity isn't just a personal flaw, it's a collective condition, a dangerous drift away from thinking, from questioning, from caring. And strangely enough, it often wears the mask of rationality. Let me explain. Stiegler looked around at the 21st century, a world obsessed with productivity, efficiency, consumption, screens, and more data than any human mind can process. And he saw something terrifying. We had built a civilization that was, in his words, organizing the production of stupidity, not by accident, but as part of how the system runs. How does that happen? It begins when we stop thinking for ourselves, when schools stop teaching why and only teach how, when politicians give us slogans instead of ideas, when scrolling replaces reading, when speed matters more than depth, and when knowledge becomes just another product to be sold, measured, and ranked. Stiegler saw this happening everywhere, especially in universities. Institutions once built to question power were now serving it. Professors were no longer thinkers, but content producers. Students weren't seekers, but customers. This, he said, was the real stupidity. Not ignorance, but the loss of care. Care for truth, care for thought, care for the future. And once that care disappears, it opens the door to something worse: cowardice, conformity, and even cruelty. Because without thinking, we become easy to manipulate, easy to frighten, easy to turn against one another. This is what Stiegler meant when he said that stupidity is tied to immaturity. He borrowed the word Mündigkeit from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. It means maturity, not just physically, but intellectually. The ability to think for yourself, to take responsibility for your own understanding of the world. Kant said, "Enlightenment is humanity's emergence from its self-imposed immaturity." Stiegler said we were going backward. And here's the kicker. This isn't just happening on the fringes. It's at the heart of our most advanced systems. Education, media, politics, economics, all of them speeding up, dumbing down, and demanding that we keep consuming, keep performing, but never pause to reflect. So, what is stupidity? It's not a lack of brain power. It's the absence of thoughtfulness. It's the erosion of dialogue. It's what happens when we lose our grip on the very thing that makes us human, the desire to understand. And if we don't reclaim it, if we don't start thinking again, slowly, deeply together, then stupidity won't just be something we suffer. It will be something we become. Once upon a time, not that long ago, the university was a sacred place. Not sacred like a church, sacred like a forge. A place where young minds were sharpened, where questions were dangerous, and truth was never easy. Where you didn't just learn facts, you learned how to think. But something changed. Walk into many universities today and you'll feel it. The tension, the emptiness, the quiet resignation. It's like the soul of the place has faded, replaced by marketing slogans, learning outcomes, and Wi-Fi passwords. Bernard Stiegler saw this change as a symptom of something far deeper, a transformation that didn't happen overnight. It started slowly. Budgets shrank, bureaucracy grew, funding dried up unless it came with strings attached. And little by little, universities stopped being guardians of knowledge and became service providers. Students, now called customers. Degrees, a product, and professors, caught in an impossible choice: produce, publish, perform, or perish. But it wasn't just about money. What really disturbed Stiegler was how the university had stopped fighting back. It had surrendered to the logic of the market, where only the measurable matters, surrendered to a system that values speed over depth, content over critique, and compliance over curiosity. And worst of all, some of the brightest minds helped make it happen. In his book, Stiegler references the documentary Inside Job, a searing look at the 2008 financial crisis. It showed how some of the most respected economists in the US, many from Ivy League universities, played a central role in designing the very systems that crashed the global economy. Not only that, they profited from it, writing papers, giving expert advice, all while pocketing money from the same banks they were supposed to be analyzing. Think about that. The same institutions built to critique power were now enabling it. And this wasn't just a fluke, it was the new normal. Universities had become tools in what Stiegler called an economy of carelessness, a system that runs not on wisdom, but on short-term gain, distraction, and obedience. But this wasn't just about universities. It was about a much bigger war, the war of reason against itself. Because here's the tragic twist. The very enlightenment that once taught us how to think, how to question, how to grow, is now being used to justify systems that keep us from thinking. Data-driven models, algorithmic assessments, performance indicators, metrics, dashboards, all of it sounds smart, but it flattens thought. It measures everything except meaning. Stiegler said, this is how stupidity becomes institutionalized. When a university no longer asks why, when it stops challenging the assumptions behind the world it lives in, when it becomes afraid of uncertainty, nuance, or depth, it becomes not a place of learning, but a factory of forgetfulness. And what's left? A hollowed-out space. A generation drowning in debt, anxious about the future, and unsure what education even means anymore. But here's the thing. This isn't just a sad story. It's a warning, and maybe even an invitation. Because Stiegler didn't just mourn the fall of the university, he called on us to reimagine it, not as a brand, not as a business, but as a space for care, for thought, for time, for building the future. He believed universities, at their best, were where democracy learned how to think, where generations shared responsibility for truth, for freedom, for the world to come. And if we've lost that, then it's up to us to fight for it. There's a strange thing that happens during a disaster. When the ground shakes, or the market crashes, or the storm hits, most people freeze. They're overwhelmed, confused, in pain, and in that moment of panic, someone steps in with a plan, a fast, sharp, decisive solution. And before you know it, things don't just go back to how they were. They come back worse, more privatized, more unequal, more broken. That's what journalist Naomi Klein called the shock doctrine, the idea that disasters are used, not just endured. Moments of chaos become opportunities, not for healing, but for taking. Bernard Stiegler saw this too, but he went deeper. For him, the shocks weren't just hurricanes, wars, or financial crashes. They were also technological. They were built into the system itself. Every time a new wave of innovation rolls in, from television to the internet, from smartphones to AI, it doesn't just change our tools. It rewires our attention. It disrupts our habits. It fries our circuits. And in that state of confusion, that state of shock, we become vulnerable, not just physically, but psychologically. Social systems collapse, education stumbles, and democracy starts to feel optional. Stiegler said this wasn't a glitch in capitalism. It was the operating system. What Joseph Schumpeter once called creative destruction, the idea that capitalism survives by constantly destroying and rebuilding, had evolved into something much darker. Now, the destruction wasn't just of outdated products or slow-moving companies. It was the destruction of memory, of community, of care. And what came in its place? What always comes in after the shock? Privatization, deregulation, obedience, and a generation too disoriented to fight back. Stiegler pointed to Hurricane Katrina as a clear example. After the storm devastated New Orleans, the public education system wasn't repaired. It was replaced. In record time, public schools were shut down and replaced with charter schools. The shock wasn't just followed by reform. It was used to eliminate public control. And here's the scary part. That same pattern, the use of crisis to break down resistance and push through radical change, is now happening globally. Economic meltdowns, pandemics, climate disasters, each one is followed by more surveillance, more corporate control, more erosion of public institutions. And through it all, one thing is always under attack: the ability to think together. Stiegler believed that in the face of these shocks, we need more than resilience. We need something he called social therapeutics, not therapy in the personal sense, but a collective, political healing, a process of reclaiming attention, rebuilding memory, and repairing the systems that allow us to make sense of the world. Because make no mistake, these technological shocks aren't going to stop. If anything, they're getting faster, more invisible, more entangled with every part of our lives. Artificial intelligence, deepfakes, algorithmic news feeds. These aren't just gadgets. They are engines of attention. They shape how we see, what we believe, and who we trust. And if we stay in a permanent state of shock, jumping from crisis to crisis, from trend to trend, we lose our ability to think critically, act ethically, or plan for the future. That's what Stiegler feared most, not the machines, but the stupidity they produce when we stop asking questions. He wasn't anti-technology, he was anti-carelessness, because technology, like he said, is a pharmacon. It can be a poison or a cure. It depends on how we use it. So the question is, are we going to keep being shocked into submission? Or are we ready to become the ones who set the terms? Because if we don't, someone else will. In the age of the screen, one thing has become more valuable than money, oil, or gold: your attention. Scroll through your phone, watch a video, check your email. Behind every swipe, every ping, every click, there's a battle being fought. Not for your ideas, not for your time, but for your mind. Bernard Stiegler believed that the most important and most invisible crisis of our time is the crisis of attention. Because when attention breaks down, everything breaks down. Education, relationships, memory, democracy. But to understand what's happening, we have to go back. Long before smartphones, there was writing. Stiegler called it a hypomnemata, a fancy Greek word that means a tool for remembering. Writing was our first external memory. It allowed knowledge to last longer than a lifetime. It helped us build civilizations, laws, science, philosophy. Every time humans created a new technology of memory, the printing press, the radio, television, our minds evolved with it. We changed how we learned, how we talked, how we thought. But with the rise of digital technology, something different happened. We didn't just change how we think. We outsourced thinking altogether. Search engines replaced memory. Notifications replaced curiosity. Algorithms replaced intention. And slowly, silently, we stopped directing our attention and let machines do it for us. This, Stiegler warned, is the real danger. Because attention is the root of everything meaningful. It's how we learn. It's how we listen. It's how we build a self. And when we lose control of it, we don't just get distracted. We get lost. Stiegler believed that attention is not just psychological, it's political. Because when our ability to concentrate disappears, so does our ability to think critically. And without that, how can democracy survive? Now think about it. The average person today touches their phone over 2,000 times a day. Teenagers scroll for hours, but struggle to read a page without checking their messages. News is replaced by headlines. Headlines are replaced by memes. Memes are replaced by vibes. We live in what Stiegler called a society of short circuits. Quick hits, instant reactions, no time to reflect, no space to breathe. And this isn't happening by accident. It's being engineered. Tech platforms profit by keeping us in a permanent state of distraction. They hijack our nervous systems. They study our behavior. They learn how to trigger our dopamine. All so we keep scrolling, keep watching, keep feeding the machine. But here's the paradox. Stiegler didn't hate technology. He didn't want to throw away our phones and go live in the woods. He believed technology could be a cure, but only if we retook control. Just like writing once helped us remember, and books helped us slow down. Digital technology could help us think better, connect deeper, learn together, but only if we design it for care, not for clicks. Because right now we're not using technology, it's using us. We've turned tools for thought into machines for addiction. And the result? A world full of people who can't focus, can't listen, can't learn, can't wait, and slowly can't care. Stiegler called this the proletarization of the mind, the outsourcing of not just labor, but of thought itself. We no longer know how to think because we no longer know how to pay attention. But here's the hopeful part. Just like we built this system, we can unbuild it. We can create technologies that support attention, not destroy it. We can build spaces, in schools, in homes, online, where slowness is a virtue and depth is celebrated. It won't be easy. It means retraining our habits, rebuilding our relationships with technology, and most of all, reclaiming our minds. Because without attention, there is no care. And without care, there is no future worth living in. Let's pause for a second, because if all of this sounds heavy, it is. Stiegler didn't sugarcoat the crisis. He saw a world sleepwalking into a future of distraction, despair, and stupidity as policy. But he also believed something else, something just as powerful, that it's not too late. We can reclaim reason, we can heal attention, we can take back the future. But to do that, we need to start with a shift that seems small, but changes everything. We need to learn how to care again. Not just in a soft, emotional sense, though that matters too. Stiegler meant care as a political force, a philosophical foundation, a design principle for a better world. And it starts in the place we've nearly abandoned, the university. Now, he didn't mean the university as it exists today, with its crumbling budgets and corporate partnerships. He meant the idea of the university, a space where people come together across generations to think critically, act responsibly, and pass on wisdom. He called for a new kind of university, one not ruled by market logic or standardized tests, but by responsibility and imagination. He believed universities could become laboratories of hope, places where we build tools to care for the world, not just exploit it. He envisioned new programs, digital studies, not just about coding, but about understanding the ethical, psychological, and political impacts of technology. Philosophy departments that don't retreat from the world but re-enter it with new urgency. Educators trained not just to deliver content, but to mentor minds. And students? Students who don't just prepare for a job, they prepare for citizenship. Because here's the truth. The next decades will demand more of us than any before. Climate, AI, inequality, migration, identity, collapse. The future won't be saved by productivity hacks or faster broadband. It will be saved by people who know how to think. People who can tell the difference between what is profitable and what is right. This is why Stiegler believed in what he called an internation, a new kind of global movement, one that connects educators, researchers, artists, students, workers across borders to rebuild the commons of thought, a kind of planetary university, distributed, decentralized, but rooted in one shared belief, that we must care for knowledge like we care for the planet, that we must treat attention as a common good, not a commodity, that we must place the value of spirit above the price of everything else. Because the real fight isn't between left and right, rich and poor, tech and no tech. The real fight is between care and carelessness, between those who are willing to think, slowly, patiently, together, and those who profit when we stop. So, what does this mean for you? What can one person do? Start by noticing. Notice when your attention is being pulled. Notice what makes you forget who you are. Notice what keeps you from thinking clearly, and who benefits when you don't. Then, choose differently. Read deeply. Question loudly. Slow down. Talk to people who don't think like you. Resist the pressure to respond instantly. And most of all, defend the places where thinking still happens. Support real education. Support independent journalism. Support public libraries. Support the voices that don't just entertain, but challenge. Because here's what Stiegler knew. Democracy isn't just voting. It's thinking together in public. And that means we need public spaces, public time, and public courage. And if those things don't exist, then we need to build them. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Now. Because the forces we're up against, distraction, privatization, engineered stupidity, they're not slowing down. But neither are we. And if we're serious about surviving this century with our humanity intact, then we don't just need better tech. We need better minds. Minds that can care, minds that can wait, minds that can learn, minds that can resist the seduction of speed and stay loyal to truth. This was Bernard Stiegler's invitation, not to despair, but to begin again, with care, with courage, and with each other. So here we are. We began with a question. Are we getting smarter or just more distracted? And what we've uncovered isn't just a crisis of education or economics or technology. It's a crisis of meaning, a crisis of care. Bernard Stiegler warned us, we are living in a time where stupidity is not just allowed. It is manufactured, where knowledge is hollowed out, where memory fades, where speed is king and reflection is rare. But he also gave us something more precious than critique. He gave us a challenge to slow down, to rebuild trust in thought, to reclaim attention as an act of rebellion, and to remake the systems we've inherited, not for profit, but for the future. Because in the end, this isn't about Stiegler, it's about us. Our capacity to resist the noise, our courage to ask better questions, our decision, right now, to step out of the fog and say, we remember who we are. We are not machines. We are not consumers. We are not data points. We are thinkers. We are caretakers. We are builders of a world that still has time, just enough time to change. So let this be the beginning of conversations that go longer than a scroll, of ideas that go deeper than a trend, of lives that go slower but mean more. If this message resonates with you, share it. Pass it on, start a conversation. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that challenge, that question, that care, subscribe. Join the growing circle of people who believe that thought still matters, because stupidity is not destiny. And reason, real, living, caring reason, it's still out there, waiting for us to come back to it.